Azerbaijan, a strategic asset for Europe and a headache for Putin. Azerbaijan is becoming a key strategic piece for European security and a real headache for Putin. This country, located in the Caucasus region that may seem distant, is a powerful pressure point that Putin uses to blackmail his European adversaries. The Caucasus is a hotspot between Europe and Asia, full of conflicts such as those in Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenia, and Georgia, all within Russia's sphere of influence. If Putin decided to destabilize the region, Europe could face new migration crises, instability on its borders, and increased military pressure. It would be similar to what happened after the Syrian war started in 2012, but there's more. The southern gas corridor runs through the Caucasus, a pipeline that allows Europe to receive gas directly from the Caspian Sea without relying on Russia. So, what's Azerbaijan's role in all this? In 2022, it signed a memorandum with the European Union to double its gas exports by 2027. That move marked a shift away from Russia and a step closer to Europe, positioning Azerbaijan as a reliable energy partner in the face of the Kremlin. The problem is, Russia still holds significant influence in the region and continues to threaten countries like Georgia and Armenia, which have not dared to follow Azerbaijan's lead. But if Azerbaijan can prove it's possible to survive and even thrive without Putin, and firmly align itself with Europe, other threatened nations might follow suit. That would dramatically weaken Putin's grip on the region and reduce the threat it poses to Europe. And that brings us to today's story, one of spies, betrayals, and high-stakes confrontation. Spies disguised as journalists. That's how Igor Kartavig and Yevgeny Belasuv, two agents of Russia's Federal Security Service, were operating undercover, disguised as Sputnik journalists and accused of espionage. This isn't a movie. It actually happened recently in a small Caucasian country that decided to confront Russia. Azerbaijan arrested suspected Russian spies, just as its relations with Moscow reached a new low. While it's not surprising that Moscow would use any means, media included, for espionage, what is surprising is that Azerbaijan dared to expose the network and publicly accuse Russia. As expected, this tanked diplomatic relations between the two nations. But it wasn't an isolated incident. Just days earlier, on June 27th, in the Russian industrial city of Yekaterinburg, Russian special forces carried out a violent raid targeting ethnic Azerbaijanis. Around 50 people were arrested, several were injured. And two Azerbaijani brothers, Giladin and Kusin Safarov, died in custody under suspicious circumstances. Autopsies showed severe trauma and broken ribs, contradicting Russia's claims that the men died of heart failure. Survivors reported beatings, electrocution, and degrading treatment. In Baku, this was seen as political intimidation and provoked widespread outrage. Azerbaijan's state agency Asertic publicly compared Russia's current policies to those of Nazi Germany, claiming the Kremlin is using war as a tool of internal repression and external coercion. The Azerbaijani government responded swiftly, canceling Russian visas, suspending official visits, arresting Russian nationals linked to the Sputnik agents, and banning all Russian cultural events in Azerbaijan. What started as a tense diplomatic pause has now become a full-blown crisis. And this isn't the first major incident. The downed plane. In December 2024, a civilian Azerbaijani plane was shot down from Russian territory, crashing in Kazakhstan. The official explanation was a Russian air defense system error. The Kremlin simply said, "We're sorry, but it wasn't our fault." President Ilham Aliyev called the incident unacceptable and questioned whether it was really an accident. Soon after, Baku retaliated by expelling pro-Russian political members, closing Russian cultural centers, and accelerating gas supply plans to Europe, working with Ukraine, and deliberately ignoring Moscow. These aren't coincidences. They marked the beginning of a calculated geopolitical shift. From Soviet ally to regional power, Azerbaijan, a former Soviet republic, has always maintained a balanced foreign policy, careful not to align too closely with either the West or Moscow. But that's changing. In the early 1990s, after the Soviet Union collapsed, Azerbaijan was heavily dependent on Moscow economically, politically, and militarily. Russia played the role of protector, helping manage internal conflicts like the bloody war with Armenia over Nagorno-Karabakh, though not without extracting a heavy price and influence. But things began to change in the 2000s under President Ilham Aliyev. Azerbaijan started capitalizing on its greatest assets: oil and gas from the Caspian Sea. Foreign investment poured into the energy sector. Exports increased thanks to the opening of the Baku-to-Tbilisi pipeline in 2006. And high global oil prices reduced Azerbaijan's dependence on Moscow. Russia, meanwhile, played both sides, selling weapons to both Baku and Yerevan, maintaining troops in the region and benefiting from the energy trade, all while asserting control. But like any toxic relationship, things eventually explode. Putin's war in Ukraine could end up costing him control over the South Caucasus. Turning point: the 44-day war. The real shift began in 2020, with military and technological support from Turkey and Israel. Armenia defeated Armenia in the 44-day war, reclaiming large areas of Nagorno-Karabakh. Russia, Armenia's traditional protector, responded by sending 2,000 peacekeeping troops and brokering a ceasefire, nothing more. Armenia, this felt like betrayal. For Azerbaijan, it was confirmation that it could win without Russian help. Russia's greatest fear is watching its old allies drift toward NATO and the West. The European Union, with its well-regulated market and energy needs, is increasingly attractive. And Turkey, Azerbaijan's closest ally, has stepped into a leading role. Turkey has provided Azerbaijan with drones, military training, and strong diplomatic support. The two countries even refer to their alliance as two states, one nation. Due to their shared ethnic and cultural roots, the masterstroke, the Zangezur Corridor. Azerbaijan's next strategic goal is the Zangezur Corridor highway and rail link connecting mainland Azerbaijan to its Nakhchivan exclave, through southern Armenia and then on to Turkey. The corridor was part of the 2020 ceasefire deal, but its completion depends on Armenia allowing land transit without customs control, something politically difficult for Yerevan. Still, if completed, it would cement Azerbaijan's regional connectivity and strengthen ties with Turkey and Europe. And Europe is paying attention. In July 2022, the EU signed a deal with Baku to double gas exports to Europe by 2027 to 20 billion cubic meters per year. That gas now flows to countries like Greece, Albania, and Italy. Then onward to the rest of the EU. Russia fights back, but the Kremlin isn't giving up easily. Espionage, disinformation campaigns, and covert operations are all part of Russia's playbook. Putin sees the Caucasus as nearly as strategic as Ukraine, and losing influence here would be another blow to his domestic and geopolitical narrative. Azerbaijan, meanwhile, continues to strengthen its ties with Turkey and more, cautiously with the West. Europe is desperate to cut its dependence on Russian gas, and Ankara, eager to lead a Turkic bloc. Give Baku every reason to maintain its new course. But can Azerbaijan keep its balance without triggering a larger conflict? Baku will move carefully. It knows breaking ties with Russia outright would be like tugging a bear's beard. And that bear still has the power to destabilize the region in many ways. The wider web, Russia's deep roots in the Caucasus. Russia's influence in the Caucasus isn't just diplomatic, it's a web of military, economic, intelligence, and cultural control built over decades. In Armenia, Russia's FSB operates from inside the Armenian National Security Service, sharing databases and even facilities. Moscow controls parts of Armenia, borders, and maintains a massive military base in Gyumri with 5,000 troops and air defense systems aimed at Turkey. Armenia may be frustrated with Moscow's inaction during the Nagorno-Karabakh war, but given the presence of that base and its fear of being overrun by Azerbaijan and Turkey, breaking with Russia is nearly unthinkable. Georgia. The rebellious neighbor Georgia is the neighborhood's black sheep. Since the Rose Revolution in 2003, it has tried to distance itself from Moscow. In 2008, Russia invaded, occupying Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and has kept a strong espionage presence ever since. Russia still controls those separatist territories through local proxies and ensures they remain politically aligned with the Kremlin. Russian intelligence even manages the local police and funds their budgets through Moscow's Ministry of Finance. And the current Georgian government is increasingly leaning anti-Western. Despite strong public support for the EU and NATO, with 20% of its territory occupied, and a significant portion of its economy reliant on remittances from Russia, breaking free is extremely difficult. Chechnya, Ingushetia, and Dagestan, though part of the Russian Federation, These republics are key to understanding Moscow's paranoia. Their histories of insurgency and Islamic terrorism make them extremely sensitive for the Kremlin. Russia spends billions in subsidies and buys loyalty to keep them quiet. For example, it spends about 300 million rubles a year just to maintain control over Chechnya. What's next? Russia's web in the Caucasus spans from embassies and treaties to espionage, propaganda, and military occupation. The arrest of Russian agents in Baku may have stirred the hornet East's nest, but it's far from empty. So which countries might follow Azerbaijan's lead? Georgia seems the most likely candidate, given its history of resistance and pro-Western public. But its economic and energy ties to Russia remain a major obstacle. Armenia, though afraid of Azerbaijan and Turkey, is starting to show signs of fatigue. Its prime minister recently stated, "We can no longer rely on Russia for protection," and Armenia has even begun holding joint military exercises with US forces, and that's what worries Moscow the most. Why Azerbaijan matters to Putin? Losing Azerbaijan would mean losing access to the Caspian, its oil and gas routes, and its gateways to Iran and Central Asia. But more than that, the Kremlin fears a domino effect. If Azerbaijan shows it's possible to prosper without Moscow, others may follow Armenia, Georgia, even Belarus, or the volatile republics in Russia's own south. That's the Kremlin's nightmare, especially now, with its strategic losses mounting. The Caucasus, once seen as Russia's backyard, may be slipping from its grasp. Silent defeat may already be underway.